Hello. So my name is David Dowling. I am a member of the J. Reuben Clark Law Society, and I'm grateful for the opportunity I have to interview and talk a little bit today with Don Hawkins and Benjamin Bull from NCOSE. And I'm going to have them each introduce themselves briefly before we begin our interview. So Don, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So we're with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. I serve as our CEO. And Ben here is our General Counsel and Senior Vice President. We're eager to be here with you. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation, we really believe in a world free from sexual abuse and exploitation. We believe that every human being deserves the opportunity to live life to its fullest potential. And we believe that institutions and individuals have to work together towards this realization. And as we work towards it, we need more support and more allies. So we're here with you, inviting you to join us in this quest. Ben, what else would you add? Tell us about your work.
Well, thank you, Dawn. Well, I'm the General Counsel of NCOSE. I'm also Senior Vice President. I run the Law Center, and I'm also serve as Corporate Counsel for NCOSE. And we exist basically to try to end sexual exploitation, the very thing we're going to talk about today. And so it's really a pleasure to be with the society, really, very much.
Thank you both. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you bringing your expertise and experience to this important topic and sharing some of this information with our members. And I guess what I'd like to do is kick off with a question. And I'm going to start off by asking Dawn, can you explain to us a little bit more, what is sexual exploitation?
Yes, not a happy topic we're discussing today, but I would say that sexual exploitation encompasses a wide range of sexual abuse or utilitarian sexual uses of persons, regardless of age. And usually this is an actual or attempted abuse of a position of vulnerability or a differential power or trust for sexual purposes. And it includes a broad range of things like sexual objectification, to sexual violence, to pornography, prostitution, sex trafficking, child sexual abuse. All of these things we believe constitute sexual abuse and exploitation. And we're keenly aware of how these issues overlap and reinforce one another. And we really believe at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation that the only way to solve these problems is if we start to attack them as ones that overlap and reinforce each other. Just quick, for example, when you look at violence against women, if we want to end men's sexual violence against women, we have to also address pornography. Right now, for example, so many people talk about we just need to teach consent. And if we teach boys consent, if we teach girls when and how to consent, that will solve the problem. But the truth is that it won't solve the problem if our young boys and our young girls are raised on a diet of hardcore violent pornography, where the majority of content that they're observing is extreme violence against women. So this just goes to show if we want to end one, we have to address the other together. And so that's what we try to do.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and much sexual exploitation is actually, I was just going to add what Dawn said, a lot of sexual exploitation, much of it is actually illegal. It is, it's illegal in the sense that obscene pornography is against the law of every state and against the federal violation of federal statutes. Sex trafficking is a violation of federal law, and almost every state has a law against sex trafficking. So there are tools on the books to fight this, in addition to some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Okay, so let me ask you both, and Dawn, perhaps you could kick off by explaining, how can this be prevented? You know, because as you said, it is very pervasive.
Yeah, well, I would say, how can it be prevented? We have to begin to address these issues at their root, how they overlap and reinforce one another. What we're coming to you today is the argument that we have to be active in the courts and in the legislatures. We need policy to help teach people that it's not okay to use and abuse and exploit others. And so we've come up with a strategy, which we have more videos to share with you, more discussions where we outline more of that strategy. But it's so important that we're active in the state legislatures, the federal legislature, and in our courts if we want to begin to shift these things.
And we'll talk about some of that activity in the courts, I think, in a couple of questions that we have coming up. But we are very active in the courts, as Dawn has alluded to, including class action lawsuits against some of the worst violators of sexual exploitation.
The lawsuits are very exciting.
What I love whenever I talk to both of you is how passionate you are about this. And I know that this is, as you mentioned, one in a series of videos that are going to be done in and around the work that you all do. So, we are so grateful for your passion behind the work that you're doing. So let me ask you, who is involved in sexual exploitation? Who is harmed by this work that happens?
I want to share my screen. I want to show you
Okay.
a survey that we did. So, we did a couple of focus groups with youth who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we did it in Virginia, Arizona, and Washington State. I'm going to tell you the results of the Virginia and Arizona surveys, but I led the one in Virginia and an ally read the one in Arizona. But we asked 4 questions of the youth. In Virginia, it was 10 youth ages 16 to 18, mixed boys and girls. So I asked, have you ever seen pornography on social media? Have you ever been asked for nude images by a stranger? Have you been sent nude images? And have you been solicited for sex acts? And I explained to our young people that means that they've been asked to perform a sex act online or in person for exchange of something of value. And as you can see here, 10 out of 10 of the youth in Virginia said yes to all of those questions. And I'm just trying to answer your question by explaining that everyone is impacted by sexual abuse and exploitation. It's touching everyone, every one of us, especially our young people. And so we did this in Arizona, and they split it. It was only the young women in Arizona, and they split it into 2 age groups. So the 12 to 13-year-olds, they asked 6 of them. So like 5 of 6 said they'd seen porn on social media, and the only one that didn't have any access to social media or smartphones yet. So have you been asked for nude images by a stranger? 5 of our 13-year-olds said yes. Have you been sent nude images? 4 of the 6. And when they said they didn't think that they'd been solicited for sex acts, but all of them had received messages from male strangers that were sexual in nature. And then the slightly older group, 14 to 17 years old, of 20 young women, you can see it became 20 out of 20 said yes to this. This is the real life impact that these things are having on our young people today. I could go into statistics on how prevalent it is and who's harmed. I mean, I just think this speaks for itself. When we start talking about sex trafficking, how many individuals are impacted by sex trafficking, it's not 10 out of 10, right? But it's a number that's way too high. That the fact that any one of our, anyone is being used and abused and sold for sex against their will is a problem, and one that we need to combat. When we talk about pornography, I think it's almost completely universal harm. It's harming those who are viewing the content, and it's harming their families, their loved ones, their spouses as well. It's impacting the culture around them. What's happening, for example, if our young people are being raised on a diet of this really hardcore violent pornography, but then they become our judges and our police officers and our doctors and our teachers, right? So here I just want to explain, it's not about numbers, because the numbers, it's like 100% of people that are being impacted by sexual abuse and sexual exploitation.
Yeah, I mean, the powerful thing that comes out of looking at that survey that you conducted is it's easy to kind of think that's happening in other communities and it's happening to other people's children, but it's not. It's everywhere. It's happening in all families, and we can pretend that we're safe because we're behind some kind of nice fence, but that doesn't protect us in any way, shape, or form, does it?
No, I mean, I work on this. This is my life. I work way more than 8 hours a day, right? I care so much about trying to create a better world, but yet no matter how much I give, it's touching my family still, right? My own family is still hurt by these issues. So it's very true.
Yeah. Can you explain to me where does sexual exploitation take place? Like, where is this happening? How is this happening?
Well, I'll jump in. The number one place is the internet, and we know the internet is omnipresent. How many kids have smartphones in their pockets? Almost all of them. The internet, and we know on the internet that there are hardcore outlets like MindGeek, Pornhub, and X videos, but some people don't realize that exploitation and sex trafficking occurs on Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, Tumblr, Reddit. These more respectable online platforms. Exploitation's happening every day. Hotels, we have a lawsuit against Wyndham Hotels for knowingly allowing many of its properties to be used by sex traffickers. Truck stops, agricultural centers, major sporting events, you'll see exploitation, you'll see prostituted women, you'll see trafficking, and really all pornography by its very nature is exploited because it objectifies women. In pornography, women exist for one reason only, and that's to please men. The city of, I was just on the phone with a lady that had a really bad experience. She's a survivor in the city of Las Vegas, and the state of Las Vegas, the state of Nevada. They profit from the sex trafficking industry by licensing it, collecting taxes. And the power to tax, they become dependent on it. And so they're actually driving it forward. And that's just some of them. I know Dawn probably has some other ideas as well.
I think you really hit it. I wanted to hit home how prevalent it is on the internet, and
Yes.
how much easier it is now. I was visiting with some young girls who were survivors of sex trafficking, and they were showing me how they were targeted and then groomed and then sold, and it all happened online. And many of them, there were 5 of these young girls, and 4 of them came from like intact, healthy, relatively healthy families, and all the long list of ways, and yet they still found themselves very vulnerable and open to these predators. So it's sadly happening everywhere. I don't want to scare everyone, but that's the reality of living in 2021.
If your child has a phone or a Chromebook or a laptop, it's not a question of if they'll be exposed to hardcore pornography and exploited. It's only a question of when.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember talking with a friend who told me that they had gone in and were focused on cleaning up their child's phone and making sure all of the apps and social media, and it was all locked down. And then they discovered that their child was using the Maps app. So they'd left the maps on there so that, it's a harmless app, but apparently you can go in and see images, and pornographic images were being shared through that. And, the most innocent, app left on there to just get directions, and the child had access to pornography. So let me ask you, Ben, how is sexual exploitation being monitored or policed?
Well, that's a good question. I want to mention that we have something called the Dirty Dozen list, which talks about a lot of organizations which are we think are really the bad actors in this area. And the reason it's important is because some of them are the biggest corporations in the world on our Dirty Dozen list. And these are companies that basically knowingly exploit. Companies like Amazon, Chromebook, EBSCO, Netflix, OnlyFans, Reddit, Seeking Arrangements, and a number of others you'd recognize. Perhaps Dawn can mention that as well. But also, as I mentioned, companies like Facebook and Twitter, they claim to monitor their sites, but they really don't. When they say they monitor and they exclude sexual exploitation or child sexual abuse materials, that's as much public relations. In fact, it's more public relations than anything else, because they simply do not invest the resources or the assets in it, and they could, because they make billions. In other words, they tolerate a certain amount of sexual exploitation and illegal material on their sites. Some government entities do a good job of dealing with this. There are some cities that are going after people who are the customers or purchasers, for example, of prostituted women who are ultimately perhaps the most exploited among us. And some of them are going after creating something called John schools. And so credit to them, the cities that are doing that. The federal government, I fear, is to a large extent is AWOL on this issue. Yes, they have enforced some federal sex trafficking laws against a handful of entities and bad actors, but they failed to enforce obscenity laws for the last 3 administrations. And it's because of that a vacuum has been created. That, there's a great saying that nature reports a vacuum. Well, there's now an enforcement vacuum, and so the hardcore pornography folks are coming in and filling it. Even the social media people that want to be respectable, and they have shareholders and they have shareholder meetings, and so they want to put on a face that they're law-abiding folks, but they're not. They're taking advantage of every angle, every inch that the government is allowing them to have, and they consider themselves to a large extent immune. And so there are a lot of bad actors out there, and one of the things that Dawn and her team on the corporate side do is to out the bad actors.
Yeah, I would add, we need accountability, and if there becomes accountability, then we know that the exploitation industry will shrink. So one way we're seeking that is through corporate advocacy, but it's not enough. We need transparency and accountability at the federal and state level as well. One way we're doing that is through litigation. We're suing these companies that have bad policies in place to hold them accountable for the harm they're creating. And these lawsuits are changing the game. But we're also looking forward to legislation as well. And I just want to give an example. Just a couple of months ago, if you had Googled child pornography, you type that in the search bar, you would get a response that shows like a cyber tip line to the FBI where to report that you came across this stuff. But below the first 2 recommendations, you would have had endless links to Pornhub and Xvideos, because both Pornhub and Xvideos also are full of child sexual abuse material. Many people don't realize that. There's so many survivors that have come out in the last few months about that. But also Pornhub and Xvideos are changing the search terms so that people who are typing these terms in, they'll be driven to their website. So what happened? We went to Google last year telling them, you need to change your algorithms. You're part of this problem. I mean, if you search some of these really horrific terms, you're getting that are clearly it's illegal content. You're getting this hardcore pornography. Google told us initially last year, there's nothing we can do. It's protected speech. No, we're not going to do anything about it. Well, since then, we've gone to Congress, and Congress introduced legislation called the Earn It Act. And we went to the New York Times, and they launched a big two big news exposés. And what has Google done because of the threat of legislation and the public pressure? They changed the search results. If you type in child pornography now to Google, you don't get any links to any pornography websites as far as like 10 pages on Google went. You get only resources for help and why this is harmful content and where you can go to find help if you're struggling. So I share this because it's the corporate accountability side together with legislation, together with litigation. And I think that's what we bring to the table that's really unique and why the society can be such a help to us.
Well, let me ask you, because there's so much that needs to be said, so much that needs to be done. In a general sense, what can be done to help or to prevent sexual exploitation?
This is where the J. Reuben Clark Society can really step up and play a meaningful role. One of the things that we tried to do, starting a few years ago, was to get aligned. We're trying to get the best law firms in the nation to understand the problem and to use some of the tools that are out there to represent survivors and bring lawsuits on their behalf against online violators and online exploiters. And we mentioned the class action lawsuits. They would not be possible without the 4 or 5 major law firms that we're working with directly. We have a major lawsuit against MindGeek and Pornhub, a class action lawsuit filed in Alabama on behalf of the tens of thousands of children that have been trafficked on those pornography websites. We have a class action lawsuit out in federal court in California, again with multiple law firms coming alongside of us against Xvideos, again representing children who've been trafficked on those platforms. We have a major lawsuit against Twitter on behalf of two 13-year-old boys that were trafficked on that platform, again with the help of private law firms. Our law center, we have a total of three lawyers, 3 full-time, make that 4 full-time lawyers. I almost excluded myself. And we can't be everywhere all the time, but we can extend our reach with like-minded, really passionate and committed lawyers out there who care about this issue. And people ask me, Ben, can we actually win this battle? The answer is yes. All you have to do is look at the cigarette industry, the tobacco industry, where that was 30 years ago. I mean, today you buy a pack of cigarettes, you have skull and crossbones on the side, for goodness sakes. It's a crime to smoke inside. It's politically incorrect, culturally incorrect. And we're beginning to have states pass resolutions saying that pornography is a health hazard. And Utah has really been a leader in this area. They passed a law that when you go online and you try to access a hardcore pornography site, a page will come up telling you that this is hazardous to your health. That hasn't been challenged by the bad guys in court. That is on the books right now. Every state could do that, and I think the federal government could do that as well. So there are a lot of tools on the books, and I would love to meet with any of the society lawyers that are interested in getting in this work, seeing what role they could play. If they want to be lead counsel, there's plenty of work to be done. If they want to be supportive, let's go. But we can win this battle if we'll link arms, join together, and make it happen.
I would just add to Ben's comments that, this movement for human dignity is strong in many other areas. There's so much support. There's not enough, but there's a lot of support for victims as they go forward in their journey for healing. There is not a strong presence in the courts and legislatures, and that's where we need to beef it up. So those of you in this society, if you care about these issues, this is like a unique talent that you could bring to a movement that badly needs more assistance. So really encourage you to tune in to the other presentations that we're offering and reach out to us if you're interested in helping.
Well, thank you both. I really appreciate your time today and your dedication to the work that you do and to spreading this important message. We will, of course, as you've already mentioned, and as I've mentioned, be conducting other interviews and definitely getting your information out so that anybody who's interested in connecting with you can do so. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, David. It's our
Bye,
pleasure.
David.